Wyatt, you better come watch this.
Kyle woke up. He is famous. Kyle thought very carefully about the first move of his day. As Kyle started to leave his bed, something stopped him. Maybe it was a smell in the air. Maybe it was the chill from outside, or maybe it was just pure luck. Kyle had been imbued with the spirit of Christmas. In an instant, Kyle began to hear the dreams and wishes of every child in the world all at once. Kyle's newfound abilities were quite overwhelming. He clutched his head and screamed loudly. The voices did not stop. Not to be left alone, Kyle was gifted with a Christmas miracle. Small bumps began forming under his skin, pushing outward. Kyle's skin began to stretch and tear, letting loose a small army of elves that had been growing in his stomach. The elves scattered around Kyle's apartment, foraging for... Kyle burst an elf army. He had been chosen to become Santa Claus. Kyle decided that the best course of action was to fulfill his duties as Santa Claus. Kyle stepped out of bed, stray elves falling from various holes in his skin. Kyle must now continue his day as Santa Claus. Kyle decided to take some time to choose the perfect outfit, knowing how important appearance is. Kyle appropriately chose to dress as Santa, who he was. Kyle thought it would be nice to make some Christmas cookies. He opened every drawer and cupboard in his kitchen, trying to decide what he would top his cookies with. Soon, he had narrowed it down to 4 choices. Kyle placed a generous amount of sprinkles on each cookie. They were delicious. Kyle hurried to the set. Sitting across from his host chair was a glamorous woman with an air. As Kyle approached her, Rachel... "Good evening, Kyle," she said, looking him in the eyes. "I've been looking forward to being here." Kyle responded.
Oh, maybe this one.
"And I as well, Rachel," answered Kyle, extending his hand in greeting. "You are a most welcome guest." After other mild exchanges of pleasantries, Kyle and Rachel were prompted to take their places for the broadcast.
That's right. Thank you.
A moment after seating, the studio... "Good evening, everyone," said Kyle, looking at the camera. "Welcome back to Stay Up Late with Kyle." Kyle continued. "I am your host, Santa Claus. I am here to bring you Christmas cheer." Kyle put his notes down and looked at Rachel. Said Rachel, not understanding. "It's not something to joke about, Rachel," said Kyle. "I take being Santa very seriously." "And I take you very seriously, Kyle," said Rachel, trying to play along. "I am not Kyle," said Kyle. "I am Santa Claus." "I'm sorry, Santa," said Rachel matteredly. "Do you happen to have your naughty and nice list with you? I want to know where I stand." Kyle realized he had not written his naughty and nice list. Trying to save face, Kyle retaliated. "Well, a real Santa doesn't need a list because he has it all up here." Kyle tapped on his head a few times. Rachel was unconvinced. "Kyle, one of Santa's only defining characteristics is having a naughty and nice list. Don't take it away from him." Kyle began to doubt if he had truly experienced a Christmas miracle or not. "Rachel," he said, "I have to be Santa." "Why's that, Kyle?" Rachel looked at him sweetly. "Because earlier today I birthed thousands of elves from my very flesh," said Kyle. "Here, I'll do it again." Kyle tried to produce more elves from his skin. What Kyle did not know is that he had not produced the elves from a Christmas miracle. In fact, Kyle had been infested by the mother elf who had laid her eggs in his stomach for incubation.
Oh.
Irritated by the commotion, the mother elf burst out of Kyle's mouth, screeching her war cry. Pandemonium ensued as the mother elf aggressively attacked all present. Rachel drew a blunt weapon from her pant leg and started to beat the elf monster senseless.
Kyle is famous. That's all you need to know.
Eventually, the mother elf had taken enough. With a parting screech, she scurried out of the studio to find a new host. Nobody quite knew what to do next, so nobody did anything. Eventually, Kyle addressed the audience. "Everybody," he said, "I don't think I'm Santa Claus." The producer shut the cameras off and everyone went home. Kyle continued the coming days as normal, but vetted his diet much more carefully.
The end.
Kyle thought very carefully about the first move of his day. As Kyle started to leave his bed, Kyle must now continue his day as Santa Claus. Kyle appropriately chose to dress as Santa, who he was. Kyle knew he must construct his naughty and nice list. He began to think of all of the people in his life. Kyle thought of Gabby. Gabby crashed through Kyle's floor and began punching him in the face repeatedly. After a few minutes, she left through his bedroom door. Kyle thought of Rachel. Kyle thought of Techno Jim. Kyle thought of Kyle.
Definitely naughty.
Kyle ripped his list out of his notebook.
I don't want to do the rest of that.
Kyle thought it would be nice to make some Christmas cookies. He opened every drawer and cupboard in his kitchen, trying to decide what he would top his cookies with. Soon, he had narrowed it down to 4 choices.
Cover them with dirt.
Kyle sprinkled a small amount of dirt on each cookie. They were iffy. Kyle hurried to the set. Sitting across from his host chair was a glamorous woman with an air of... As Kyle approached her, Rachel looked up and smiled. "Good evening, Kyle," she said, looking him in the eye. Kyle responded. "And I as well, Rachel," answered Kyle, extending his hand a moment after... "Good evening, everyone." Kyle continued. "I am your host, Santa Claus. I am here..." Kyle put his... "It's not some... And I take... I am not Kyle. I'm sorry, Santa." "Yeah," said Kyle, pulling out his list. "You don't rank well." Rachel was visibly taken aback. Oh? Said Rachel. "Why's that, Kyle?"
'Cause you suck."
Kyle made no attempt to try to frame his comment as a joke. He stared at Rachel expressionlessly. "Well, Kyle," said Rachel, "being that I am Santa Claus, I'm not sure you have the authority to say that."
A twist.
Rachel pulled her own naughty and nice list out of her pocket. Kyle's blood ran cold. "And you, Kyle," said Rachel, "are getting awfully close to switching to the naughty list." She raised a pen menacingly. "No. Rachel, no," said Kyle. "Don't do that!" Rachel held her mouth open in a maniacal smile and drew the pen slightly closer to her list. Kyle dived across the stage, nabbing at Rachel's hands to try to steal away either the list or her pen. A fistfight between the two ensued. Blows were given to the face of each with equal gusto.
I don't have that. I have Christmas cookies with dirt.
After several minutes of being slightly amused, the producer thought it may be better to end the broadcast. As the lights shut off and the studio closed, Kyle and Rachel were still locked in combat, neither backing down. Who between the two was the true Santa was never figured out. But indeed, that night, the true Santa was involved in a fistfight and did not deliver any presents. It was the worst Christmas ever.
The end. Ooh.
Kyle thought, as Kyle started, Kyle must now continue his day as Santa Claus.
I'll put my suit on.
Kyle decided to take some time. Kyle appropriately chose to dress as Santa, who he was.
That's right. This time I'll make a nice list.
Kyle thought of Gabby. Kyle thought of Rachel. Kyle thought of Techno Jim. Kyle thought of Kyle. Kyle ripped his list out of his notebook. He opened it. Soon, he had narrowed it down to 4 choices.
Oh, dead rats.
Kyle placed one of the dead rats in his sink on each cookie. They were very bad.
Eh.
Kyle hurried to the set. Sitting across from his host. As Kyle approached her, Rachel looked. Good evening. Kyle and I as well, Rachel. And after other mild exchanges, a moment after seating, the studio lights. Good evening, everyone, said Kyle, looking. Kyle continued.
I am your host, Seth.
Kyle put his note.
It's not something to joke about, Rachel,
said. And I take you very serious.
I am not Kyle,
said Kyle.
I'm
sorry, Santa, said Rick.
Yeah, I do,
said Kyle, pulling out his list. You're on the nice list. Well, thank you, Santa, said Rachel. What a nice... Kyle was suspicious. Is it a surprise? He asked, raising. Rachel coughed. Of course it isn't. I'm nice. Always on the nice list. Okay. So if that's the case, I want to try something. So, if I put you on the naughty list, will you turn into a bad person? Like, can I control your morality? Before Rachel could answer, Kyle crossed her off of the nice list and added her name to the naughty list. Immediately, something changed. Rachel jumped out of her seat in a blind rage and began trashing the studio, laughing horribly. Kyle, suddenly curious, began adding other names of people he knew to the naughty list. Friends, family, and acquaintances of Kyle began bursting through the walls, ceiling, and floor, fire in their eyes. It did not take long for the studio to fall into complete ruins. Kyle was fascinated by the results of his actions. Kyle wrote a dissertation on the effects of Santa on adults and was published in many psych journals. As research branched off of Kyle's findings, Kyle began to be known as much for his scientific findings as his talk show. Somehow, Kyle had become extra famous. Kyle thought very carefully. As Kyle started to leave his... Kyle must now continue his day as Santa Claus.
I'll do all the Santa innings, then I'm done.
Kyle decided to take... Kyle quickly crouched down on the floor, realizing his immediate need for... Kyle winced as he realized he would probably need to bring some elves along. Kyle grabbed a nearby bag. He started to crawl around, snatching up elves left and right and chucking them inside. Soon, Kyle's bag was mostly full of elves.
Let's see what happens with this.
Kyle hurried, sitting across from his host. As Kyle approached... Good evening, Kyle, she said, looking him in the eyes. Before Rachel had completely finished her sentence, Kyle took his bag of elves and dumped them on her. The elves grabbed onto Rachel with a deathly, unshakable grip. "Kyle, what on earth?" cried Rachel. She leapt up from her chair and tried to bat the elves off of her. "These, Rachel," said Kyle, "are your newest and bestest friends. You must take good care of them." The elves looked Rachel in the eyes and smiled endearingly. Unknown to anyone previously, Rachel had terrible allergic reactions to Elfdander. Within moments, Rachel's whole body turned bright red and began to puff. This reaction was not like a normal reaction. The very foundational composition of Rachel's person began to change. Rachel started to sprout limbs from her legs and forehead. Her fingers grew extra eyes.
Oof.
As Rachel continued to mutate, it became obvious to the onlookers what was happening. Rachel was transforming into the pure embodiment of Christmas. Kyle realized that if he was going to keep his job as Santa, this would have to be nipped in the bud.
I agree.
Kyle started to pull elves off of the growing Rachel. Instead of slowing the growing process, this seemed to give Rachel's body more space to develop new limbs and ears. After pulling off a few more elves, Kyle threw up his hand in frustration and gave up. He walked out of the building. Rachel continued to grow, becoming a shapeless mass of teeth, shoulders, and fat. The elves were slowly enveloped. After the initial shock wore off, the surrounding community began to appreciate Rachel's new form. Over the years, she became an icon of local Christmas tradition, acting as a centerpiece for decoration and celebrations.
Well, that's good.
Rachel truly became the embodiment of Christmas. Kyle, still Santa, remained very jealous.
Trophy. Okay.
Kyle thought very... As Kyle must now continue his day as Santa Claus. Kyle grabbed the small... Kyle wanted to access the pantry. The pantry door locked. Instead of an assortment of canned goods and grains, Kyle grabbed a bottle of lard and stashed it on his person for later use. Kyle realized it was wise to conduct his duties as Santa. Kyle could think of nothing better than to gather children around him and give them presents. Kyle supposed it was possible there were children in the nearby park, so he quickly walked over. Upon arriving, Kyle saw several families happily walking around and playing in the snow. Kyle called for the families to gather around him. The children bounced over expectantly. Kyle presented the children with a gift. "Here, kids," said Kyle. "Enjoy." Kyle produced the bottle of lard, snapped the neck off, and poured it all over the children and their parents. The group stood, shocked and confused.
That would be too.
Kyle threw his arms out wide in celebration. "Merry Christmas!" he shouted. Kyle laughed from the bottom of his stomach. Suddenly, with a crack, all of the children pointed at Kyle, mouths hanging open and with glowing red eyes. They began to walk towards Kyle together, continuing to point and murmuring softly. Kyle suddenly realized he was in a strange situation.
Definitely.
Kyle turned to flee, but was stopped by an incoming mob of children coming towards him from behind. By pouring out lard on the children of the city, Kyle had triggered the ancient lard evil that lay underground. Sensing the incoming evil and without anywhere to turn, Kyle began to burrow into the ground. Kyle stayed under the earth and waited for the ancient evil to go away. That time, the ancient lard evil took over the populace of the town, turning Kyle's city into a mass of lumpy fat and... Over the years, many supernatural investigators tried to find the root... Roads leading to the city were eventually blocked, leaving it as a banned, evil place to never be. Kyle eventually expanded his underground home to be a series of tunnels running underneath the city. He made friends with the animals there. They taught him how to eat dirt. They showed him the wonders of the But the city above remained Kyle had changed his city forever.
With Lord. What about that laser claymore?
Kyle thought, as Kyle must now Kyle walked over to... Kyle stretched out his hand, twisting it in its socket around and around. He sang a Christmas tune under it. The door swung... expecting about... Kyle realized it was... Kyle produced the laser claymore and wordlessly handed it to the closest child. The child's eyes widened in excitement, and a wondrous grin crossed his face. Before anyone could react, the child began swinging wildly with both arms. The child's parents made an attempt to grab the child, but he quickly ran in the opposite direction, still swinging. As the child ran through the park, the claymore cut through benches, trees, and the ground itself. A path of destruction was formed. The child continued to run at full speed, entering the rest. He reached the side of a building, but did not stop. Through his wild swings, the claymore cut a hole through the wall. Within minutes, the city was in a panic as a small child systematically crashed in and out of every building he could. The rampage continued as the city residents looked on helplessly, accepting that this would be the end of their livelihood. Soon, there was no area in the city left unmarred. Destruction was rampant. Buildings toppled to the ground, the power grid was destroyed. The city was in shambles. Kyle was unsure how to react. He eventually looked at the child's parents. They were giving him a stern and slightly irritated look. "Presents are what you make of them," he said. "Your child is pure evil." Kyle walked away, feeling a little sheepish. The destruction of the city brought about a new wave of apocalypse tourism like nobody had seen before. The city's economy flourished. Kyle's city became a travel hotspot for the rest of the world. But somehow, Kyle felt a little unfulfilled. He had tried to do something lovely for the children, yes, and the city economy was flourishing. But had he really helped anyone? Kyle continued through the next few weeks, picking through the rubble on the sidewalks and feeling restless. Soon, the city was rebuilt with the income from the tourists. Shiny new buildings were erected. Restaurants opened. Kyle watched the city regrow. He felt a strange pang in his stomach. Kyle was on the brink of a new chapter in his life.
Well, that's a good ending. Ooh, I can be the last job detective now.
Kyle thought very... As Kyle started to leave, Kyle must now continue his... Kyle realized... Kyle presented the children with...
Children, it is time to listen to Santa.
The children leaped.
I have lived a long and... From the many experiences I've had...
Kyle coughed into his hand and took a deep breath.
Don't feed your girlfriend sea monkeys on the first date. There may not be a second.
Oh, I can understand that.
The children stared at Kyle blankly. Kyle screamed and began tearing at his stomach. More elves were on their way out. In a sudden explosion, elves flew out of Kyle's skin, covering the group in hungry, crawling elf flesh. The parents were whipped into a frenzy of frantically pulling elves off their children and themselves. The elves, suddenly free and ravenous, bit at the parents' hands with their teeth and screamed at the top of their lungs. Kyle, uncomfortable with the situation, decided to leave.
I would too.
On his way home, Kyle greeted everyone he passed. It had been a lovely evening. Inside his door, he stopped and smiled. Kyle knew he had done something wonderful for the children in his community. Kyle thought very... As Kyle must... Kyle approached his... A middle-aged woman named Gabby answered the door. Kyle unhinged his... Job done. Kyle returned... Kyle realized it was wise to conduct... Kyle bugged his eyes and started punching his stomach repeatedly. In a loud and sudden moment, Gabby was gifted to the children. "Here, children," said Kyle, gasping. "Is my neighbor Gabby." Gabby looked around, equal parts confused and irritated. The parents of the children collectively started screaming.
Probably would too.
"Still yourselves," said Kyle. "Gabby is a gift, not an enemy." "Kyle, I am not a thing," said Gabby. "You need to stop doing this." Kyle looked hurt. "Gabby, you're very pleasant, and I want to share you with..." "What on earth just happened? Where did she come from?" The parents continued to be horrified. "It's fine, everyone." And then everybody understood.
Oh, I see now,
Said one parent.
"Well, kids, you'd better gather her up because we need to go."
The children formed a small line and hoisted Gabby over their head.
Kyle, don't forget your rent. The landlord was asking about it today.
Yelled Gabby as she was carried away. Kyle grunted, gave a small nod, and walked away. Later that night, Kyle heard Gabby's front door slam and wondered why she had been returned. Kyle thought, as Kyle started, Kyle must now continue his day as Santa Claus.
I saw the option for nothing. Let's go to that.
Kyle realized it was wise to Kyle present... Because Kyle had not bothered to actually bring anything to give the children, he had nothing to give them.
"Sorry, kiddos," he said. "You're not getting any presents today."
Kyle let out a long, meaningful laugh.
Oh, he's gonna pay for that.
The children looked at Kyle with faces of understanding.
We understand, Santa.
One said.
It's hard to bring gifts to every child in the world. Instead, we will gift ourselves your soul.
That's not good.
The child's mouth opened to an uncomfortable size, and his eyes turned pitch black. He began to inhale. Kyle's soul began to fall from his body and be consumed by the child. But Kyle knew what to do. Kyle began spewing elves out of his mouth into the soul-rending maw of the child. One by one, the elves disappeared, feeding a small amount of what Kyle's soul could feed. After many hours, Kyle had stuffed the child completely full of elves. There was no more room for his soul to be taken. Kyle hoisted the fat and groaning child off the ground and placed him in the arms of his parents. Continue to feed him small animals for the rest of his life so he is too full to move or think, said Kyle. Then the world will be safe. Kyle skipped away gleefully, knowing he had done a wonderful thing for the city. That evening, Kyle thought back to the events of the day. He remembered that he had brought no gifts for the children. But then Kyle realized that he had gifted the children something. He had given them safety. He had given them a future. Kyle went to sleep grinning. He felt very fulfilled. Kyle had given the best gift ever.
Nothing.
Kyle thought very carefully about... As Kyle started to... Kyle realized it was wise... Kyle knew. As he met others walking along... After several... Nobody had burst into Christmas song. Nobody had wished him a Merry Christmas. Nobody had even... Kyle realized he would need to spread Christmas cheer more aggressively. Kyle walked up to a young couple chatting and laughing amongst themselves. He grabbed the woman by the shoulders and shook her lightly.
"Listen to me," he
he screamed. The couple left quickly. Kyle, not dissuaded, ran into the street, stopping a car with his hands.
Oh yeah, everybody does that all the time.
It's Christmas! Tell your family I love them!
Kyle shouted, banging his fists on the car hood. Kyle's method still proved ineffective. He realized that if he were to be a proper Santa, he must not hold back. Kyle started slamming his forehead into the car hood repeatedly, flailing his arms in the air.
It is time for presents!
Kyle emphasized each word with percussion from his face. Suddenly, Kyle was blessed with another Christmas miracle. Kyle's neck shot directly upwards, throwing his mouth towards the sky. Slowly, painfully, a live reindeer began to emerge from his
I've
throat.
seen that before.
In fact, it was not one reindeer, it was several. Kyle began to run around, arms waving, desperately trying to find a way of dislodging the animals emerging from him. In a sudden, forceful moment, reindeer after reindeer explosively shot out of Kyle's mouth. The stream did not stop there. Every orifice of Kyle's face began shooting wrapped presents of all sizes in every direction. Kyle, unaware of what to do, spun in all directions and screamed. Like doves, the presents flew far into the air, landing into the laps of the children of the world. Within a period of minutes, Kyle had managed to give the world his Santa-ly gifts. Eventually, the present spewing stopped. Kyle fell to the ground. He crawled his way back to his apartment and lay down. Kyle did not remember about his interview with Rachel.
Probably forget about it too. One more.
Kyle thought... As Kyle quickly... Kyle went... Soon, Kyle's bag was most... Kyle realized it was one. Kyle dumped his bag of elves. The elves silently looked around them, stunned by the sudden change of environment. The elves began tearing about. Ravenously, they devoured every crumb, piece of trash, and bit of roadkill they could find on Kyle's It was not nearly enough to satisfy them. They began to branch out to nearby streets. The elves could not be satiated. They began to swipe food out of the hands of nearby restaurant goers. Like a flood, the elves took over Kyle's city. Houses were broken into, streets were blocked. Within minutes, there wasn't a scrap of food left in the city. Driven by a hunger lust, the elves started gnawing their way through walls, devouring... The government's defense measures were brought in to attempt to stop the wave of elves. In a flurry of rage, the elves launched themselves directly towards their enemy. There was a grand clash of bullets and teeth. The elves clamped themselves firmly onto the soldiers. Hunks of metal and bulletproof jackets were torn asunder by the elf mouths. The army's equipment and weapons were systematically swallowed. There was nothing left to stop the elves from consuming every last material from the earth. Nothing except Kyle himself. Kyle planted himself in front of the elf mob menacingly. The elves launched themselves into the air, flying at Kyle teeth first and screaming Christmas cheer. With cat-like speed, he started grabbing elves out of the air and shoving them into his mouth. Kyle swallowed elves at a frightening pace. He grabbed them with both hands from his legs as they tried to climb up. Kyle's stomach began to bulge with elf mass, but he did not slow down. As suddenly as it had started, the flurry of elves ended. Kyle had swallowed them all. Kyle became a national icon of Homeland Defense. The world began to refer to Kyle among the great history figures of humanity. Kyle was preemptively awarded the next 2 Nobel Peace Prizes. His name became synonymous with safety and joy. Kyle spent the next few days hunched over the toilet, hacking elves out one by one and flushing them into the sewer. The elves formed an underground society in the belly of the city, living happily in peace away from humanity.
Good for them. Trophy. And your cursor. Well, got that. I'll switch them on. Alright, when I come back, it'll be detective time. I might have to split that into two, but that's okay. Thanks for watching, anybody. Bye, Wyatt.